Welcome to Success Is Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Portman, serial entrepreneur, author, and podcast host. Whether success for you is more money, time with your family, a healthy, well-balanced life, or freedom, I'm interviewing guests and getting you the advice to make it happen. So join me as we uncomplicate the complicated, help you define success, and give you the strategies to make it happen.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today on this episode of the Success Is Podcast. Joining me today is Rhonda Parker Taylor. Rhonda is an American writer, author, entrepreneur, and academic researcher. Thank you for joining us today, Rhonda.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to get into a nice, juicy discussion with you this week.
Absolutely, and I had a chance to read your book, Crossroads. It's a suspense novel. It was amazing. Can't wait to ask you some questions about it, talk a little bit about it. But before we get into that, the opening question of our podcast, what does success mean to you, Rhonda?
Success means finding balance in every aspect of your life so you can experience true joy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, at least for me, oftentimes we get focused on one thing, right? And we say, if I get to this, if I meet this marker, if I do this, if I achieve this, I'm going to be happy or I'm going to be successful, right?
Exactly, because we're raised that achieving goals is happiness, and it brings you success, and your aspirations are filled. But sometimes it's a little bit more simple, but it's harder to find the balance. The simple things in life are really the ones that bring you joy. I agree with you 100%.
So are you the type of author that when you start writing a book, you're fully dive into it, invested in it, and unavailable for that time? Or are you able to flip back and forth between daily life duties and writing, that sort of thing?
I think for me, I'd love to be able to dive all the way into it, but life isn't that way most of the time. If we all had a cabin somewhere and could get away from technology and all of those things, of course, that would be the easiest way to do it. So I try to just do it methodically. So let's say I'm developing a character. I use my science brain with that. And you're saying science for a character. How would you do that? Well, what I do is I do a soap note. When you go to the doctor, they measure you from head to toe. They ask you about your background with your family, what kind of history they have medically. Did they have any problems when they got older? And I just write that all down about the characters. And then I have that, so then if I get stuck or pulled away, I can always go back. Okay, Paris, what is her main core value? And, or Dave, what is his main core value? What are his struggles? And then I can go back and it helps me kind of toggle back and forth, because as an academic researcher and entrepreneur, other people have deadlines that they need me to meet also. So I just have to go back and forth. But hey, I would love it if I could just take off for a month somewhere and cuddle up with my computer or my laptop and a little bit of nature, and that would be heaven for me.
Yeah, you can honestly tell with your characters, they're very relatable. You can really understand and put yourselves in their shoes, every one of them, good and bad. But one thing that I really liked about your book is sometimes I'm reading something and there's something about the book that takes me out of it for a minute, like maybe something isn't quite realistic, or, I can see that it's kind of a fantasy world. Yours, I never experienced that. And I got to think it's because of your academic researching background. Everything just seems so real, authentic, heavily researched. And is that what goes into your book?
Well, first of all, thank you. That is a huge compliment. And it means that, it worked. I am a storyteller, I think, before I am really an author. I come from storytellers. If you had met my grandfather, for instance, he grew up during the Depression years, and he quit his job, which was in the military, and everybody told him, don't do it. You have, kids you have to feed. And he did it anyway. But he made, a young woman wants to live during the Depression to find a job by those storytelling of how he created an envelope that looked official and there was only one job there and he didn't know how to weld and he ran to the front of the line. He says, I got my papers, and the security let him in. And so as he's telling us as a young kid this, and he gets in there and the guy says, well, tell me about your welding experience. He says, I have none. And he said, well, how did you get in? He said, and he told them, and they said, if you could do that, we can try out to weld. And he got a job. So, and the fun thing about that is that changed the whole legacy of my family. They were Polish immigrants. And my grandparents were, my dad was raised, and he ended up working as an apprentice with his father. And then he opened up a steel manufacturing plant in a barn in Noblesville, Indiana. And now it's a large I'll say midsize manufacturing company that does auto parts and everything else. So that one creativity started the whole life for his family. So I would say I'm a storyteller before I'm a writer. And I struggled academically in writing when I was growing up. So I think it's the storytelling. And then I like people. One of the reasons I struggled younger in academics is because I want to know everything about people. I see the good in everyone. And even, I think you kind of probably see that in the bad characters in Crossroads.
Yeah. That's what makes them relatable, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, he just killed somebody, but he's, wait a minute. I kind of like it.
Absolutely.
My brother's friend or my son, or whatever, and so I think that all plays a part in it. I want people to enjoy the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. No, fantastic book. Couldn't put it down. Was up late. My wife yelling at me to go to bed, and I'm sitting there with the reading light on, reading through it. And I loved it. It was an entertaining book, and you're a phenomenal writer. So I really appreciate the work you did.
Thank you.
So you talked about your family, and even in that story, I hear some of the entrepreneur spirit, kind of come out in that, right? Like the problem solving, the, making it happen, figuring out a way. And you being an entrepreneur and an author, how would you advise aspiring writers or authors to embrace the dual nature of being an author as both the creative journey, but also the business venture? And that's the part that I think a lot of people miss out on. They're like, well, am I selling out? Or, I don't want to do that part of how do you advise people on that?
Well, I think that's in any business too, because especially if it has creativity, because I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and when there's a creative part of it, or even sometimes if they like one part of the business more than the other, they don't end up wanting to do the other. So if you don't have the money, first of all, to hire someone else to help you, you've got to figure out the business aspect. Realize that there still is marketing. There still is sales. There still is operations. There still is customer service. There's still someone that has to answer emails. There is someone that has to answer, the phone, because it's not going to sell. And you're not going to get your book into people's hands if you're not willing to either hire someone to do it or do it yourself. So you're going to have to, it's great to write the book. Don't get me wrong. I thought was, going to be the challenge of a lifetime. But really, the hardest part is once you write it, how do you get it in everybody's hands? You only have so many friends and family. Yes, they're going to buy it because they like you. That's great. And if that's what I'll never forget. My husband looked me in the face and said, are you looking for a pat on the back? Are you looking to sell books? And I looked at him, I said, well, I'm enjoying that good review, Yeah. And but that's only one review.
Yeah.
And it's all about that effort you put into it. And if you don't put the effort in, Have you talked to the bookstores? Have you talked to, not only the big block bookstores, but the independent bookstores? Have you talked to other authors? Are you networking with them? All of those things are the same things you have to do in any business. And you have to find creative ways of continually putting it in front of the audience. A good example is when I started my business, I didn't have any money, not any money per se to do any real marketing. But back then, Craigslist had really started and everybody was into Craigslist. But guess what? There were still payphones around too. And you could only have one marketing ad on Craigslist per category per phone you had. Well, I knew there was phone booths around. So I went to all the phone booths and got them in all the majors for, business plans and everything and academic research. And I put an ad in every major city.
Wow.
And it goes back to what was modeled to me.
Absolutely.
Go to the front of the line and make your case. And so I went and you have to have that as an author. You better find at least 300 different ways of marketing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Not, because the leads dry up. Okay, let's say you join one writing group or one readers group. Well, they're only gonna, you can only produce a book maybe every 6 months to a year and get it out there. So there's only, even if there's 100K followers in that group, how many of them are going to be interested in your book? Let's say it's 10%. Well, okay, is that going to be enough to eat? And I like to eat. I don't know about you, but and I like to go to restaurants. I mean, I like to cook too, but you gotta be able to, and I like to pay my bills too. So you have to find different ways to market yourself, whether you're an author or whether you're an entrepreneur. Don't sit back and say, oh, I'm not good at it. Become good at it.
Figure it out, right? Absolutely.
Or hire someone that's good at it. And I did do that. I did hire, so the publisher I went with is Seacoast Meinster. And they are known for pulling your plan together. So they help you with the publishing and they'll do the editing for you. But it's kind of a blended matrix between self-publishing and real and where you query it.
Traditional, yeah.
And they help you with the marketing and they help you understand where things are. And I got blessed because with me picking them to help me and learn the business, they said, you need to write a letter and get an influencer, someone that knows about, your category of books. And I was like, okay. And the first thing that came to mind is, okay, maybe Tori Spelling, or because it's suspense, and they're like, no, that's not who you need. And I'm like, what do you mean that's not? How could you get any better than that? And they said, you need to write a letter to Meryl Hemingway. And I said, Meryl, why would she care about my book? And they said, because this is what she's all about, life balance. We haven't talked about Crossroads it's a suspense mystery book, but at the same time, it's also about the main characters, and they're all out of balance, and they have no life balance in their lives. That's why people relate to them. They're being yanked and turned by the events of the day, and rather than having control of it. And that's what she's all about. She's about mental health and life balance. And then she's had tragedy in her life.
Yeah.
So I sat down and penned the letter and they delivered it to her. And she ended up endorsing it. So if any of your fans go out there and want to look at the trailer and the endorsement, she did a 90-second YouTube video on it.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Yeah, you bring that up. There was that theme in there, and that's probably why I could, being an entrepreneur, relate to your characters. Is they were completely out of balance, and I feel like we've all been at that point in our life where we didn't have balance, and your theme for this podcast with successes around balance really came through in that book. So the question I would ask is, writing in entrepreneurship requires resilience in the face of rejection and failure. Mm-hmm. How do you nurture your resilience and stay motivated in face of that?
Well, first of all, my life has been an up and down of highs and lows. So you do have to find ways of getting a storage unit before life does hit. It's going to hit eventually. It could be a death in the family. It could be a sick one. It could be, a dog that's not doing well. It could be an accident. It doesn't matter. There's going to be some kind of life adversity that's going to come up in your life. So if you store energy by practicing daily, finding one item. It can be going out and getting some sun because it's a beautiful day and getting some vitamin D, taking a walk, looking at some, I live on 3 acres, so I tend to watch the nature that wants to come through our property. It could be deer, it could be a possum. They're the ugliest creatures, but they do the most for our environment. So you can't, you don't want to dislike them, or a raccoon or my dogs, taking them out. Just finding one thing. It could be a moment with your loved one. Sometimes it's just that, hey, give someone a hug, call someone that you haven't talked to all week. You have to find something that brings you joy. I found when I was completely out of balance, I thought I was in balance, that I was dedicating too much time to things that didn't bring happiness. TV. I like a show here and there. I'm not downgrading TV, but I was watching, especially during the pandemic, I watched way too many.
Yeah.
And too many shows. And I found that I was just kind of low,
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I need to get my body moving. And I was ordering DoorDash too often. And, it'd come burnt or late or, something, sometimes perfect. And, it was just dissatisfying because it was the same. And so I had to say, wait a minute, you love cooking, you love nutrition, you love these things, but you're not doing them. So I have a practice, and I have a life balance book that will be coming out in November. That's basically a workbook. It makes you not only just set the goals, which we said achieving goals is wonderful, but it makes you identify what brings you full fulfillment. And it's basically takes the kind of the same approach as writing goals, a SMART goal, with just specific, measurable, and all of these things, actionable. But it's doing it from a perspective of what really brings you fulfillment. So it makes you say, what are you doing now? What worked? What didn't work? Go on to what's going to work in the future. And it does it in all your major areas of your life, your career, your home time, your alone time, your spouse time, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of us found that, especially during the pandemic. I was the same way. I had the ability to just stay home. We were there with the wife and kids, and in the beginning, it was fantastic, right? Like having everyone together and great memories of being in the house. But yeah, it was easy to slip into that, almost a depression type mode where you're not going out, you're not doing anything. And, I would think that especially on the fictional side of writing or the creative side of writing, you need to do those like new experiences and things like that to generate the creativity. Are there things that you do to kind of jar yourself or put yourself in a new position or new place that sparks some of that creativity?
Yes, I think that, that's where the research really helps. I'll read, I'll listen to music. So let's say, for instance, I'm doing a tragic scene or something. I will listen to 911 calls,
Oh my gosh.
I will watch, different ways of just sparring that brain of what happens. And then, like I said, life is up and down too. So some of those things you've experienced, um, when I was a good examples in Crossroads, chapter 1, I knew what I wanted to happen. And I went to all the conferences. The first chapter has to be one that just hooks them and traumatic, and this I'm like, okay, well then it has to be a dead body dropped.
Yeah.
What's more tragic than that? But
That's right.
where is the body going to be dropped? And I was driving from downtown Indianapolis to the west side, and there was this road that kind of circled around, and it was really eerie, and I was like, okay, now I know where the dead body is.
Yeah. Okay.
So the inspiration came from knowing what needed to happen. And here again, if you're a new writer out there, it's very important, know your genre. You need to go into bookstores, feel them, smell them, see how many pages the average length, because if you're writing poems, that's very different than it is to write a suspense novel.
Mm-hmm.
If you're love story, it's there's a typical pattern. Yes, you can recreate that pattern a little bit, to be new and fresh, but you need to know what's selling, what are people expecting. If not, you're creating a genre that's maybe not out there, and it might limit what you're able to market to, because we're creatures of habit. And the Alfred Hitchcocks out there in the world that started, the genre of suspense, they're the ones that set the pace for us. The Headless Horsemen's, even if it's a short story, there's still a certain rhythm for suspense that people want. They want you to surprise them. They want you to have hooks here and there. And think of the game Clue, if you've ever played that, or if you go into one of the new restaurant / entertainment centers where you're learning, what is it called, the mystery room or whatever. They want clues to see if they can figure it out. So it's very different for different genres. Now in Crossroads, there's a love story. I love love stories, but I think my personality is more geared towards the suspense. So there's a little bit of both.
Yeah, there was love, but it wasn't overwhelming. You know what I mean? So for a guy like me to read it, I wasn't like, oh my God, overwhelmed by this love story. It wasn't. it was in there. It was part of it, but it was very tastefully done. So
right. I wanted it to be like what we would experience in day to day. When you go to lunch at a food court, sometimes you may be drawn to somebody. Or if you're in the office and you're bantering with people, sometimes there's a spark there. So I wanted the characters to have spark between. Same thing with the police officers. I rode with the police officers here in Indiana because I wanted to get a feel for what it was like. I didn't get to see a murder scene, but what I did get to see is their banter when they were at a bad crash, when they were this. How do they get through it?
Absolutely. So going back to the balance discussion, any piece of advice that you'd give to someone like you trying to balance life and a multifaceted career, what kind of advice would you give somebody trying to find that balance in their life?
I think for me, one, hopefully you have someone in your life that tells you, hey, wait a minute, stop. No. This is what, you've got to take more time for yourself. Go soak your feet. Go get your hair done. Go do the things to take care of yourself. So surround yourself with people that tell you, hey, wait a minute, stop. The second thing that I would say is identify those things that bring you joy, and make sure that you're spending that time with that. And then the third thing that I would say is find your purpose. Because even if you're balanced and you haven't done and you've done all those other things, if you don't know what your God-given purpose is, it's very difficult for you to find balance, because you're at the whims of everything. I love helping people. I love people. I like developing them. I like for them to see that, hey, maybe I couldn't do it yesterday, but I can do it today. So that tends to be where I need to focus. But guess what? I don't do enough of it because I'm an entrepreneur. I've got this, I've got clients, I've got, I got to write, I want to do a podcast to make sure people hear about my book. So you have to find those ways and then say, okay, at this time, this stops and this starts. Get what you need to get done for this and set those deadlines. Same thing with water or, hydration. You're not going to drink 8 glasses of water or bottles of water, however you do it, if you don't set the time to do it. If you don't say today, all right, time to drink the water, because nature is, you're going to just pick what's quickest, easiest, fastest.
Yeah.
And so experiencing the sense of purpose gives you a direction. And for me, I've lost a lot of people in my life. Yesterday was a big day in my family. And this is, maybe a little off topic, but it's on topic because it's how you find balance in it. September 19th, for some reason, everybody that I love seems to depart this world on September 19th. I don't know why.
Bizarre.
Maybe I need to write a book that goes to September 19th or something.
September 19th, and that's it. Yeah.
Because my mom passed of cancer on September 19th, 2005. My adopted son was at work on September 19th, 2009, and a gunman came in and shot the security. On September 19th of 2020, my father was on his deathbed, and it was a matter of questioning, when's the time? And we were talking to him. He said, you realize that this is when D'Angelo and when Mom passed. And he said, no, let them have their day. Do it right after. And so his is September 20th. And then my uncle passed away on September 19th. So it's like one of these days, maybe it's the passing of my family, and there's a lot of different things that people say. And if you find the joy even in adversity, then guess what? You're ahead of the game, because it could be change that's on the ground. It could be that you've picked up and find some joy in during that. It can be a bird. It can be something unusual. It could be some laughter that happens in those moments, and you're building up a reserve and you're bonding with the people around you during that time. And I think that brings more of a sense of inner peace than you could ever find in materialistic things. I love materialistic things. They say diamonds are a girl's best friend, here you go. But really, it's more important to talk to my sister
on relationships than
the other. So contributing to personal and collective growth in my personal life gives me that balance.
Absolutely. Well, Rhonda, I want to thank you so much for this interview today and writing this great book, Crossroads by Rhonda Parker Taylor. But Rhonda, for everyone that wants to follow what you have going on out there, how do they get in touch with you? How do they follow you and what you have going on?
Sure. I'm trying to make it very easy for those that want to. Everything's under Rhonda Parker Taylor. Rhonda's with an H. So it's rhondaparkertaylor.com. If you go to Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, what else? What other ones are out there? YouTube. They're all under Rhonda Parker Taylor. I try to make it easy. Just remember that Rhonda's with an H.
Thank you so much for today. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Success Is podcast. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you guys for watching today. Be sure to like and subscribe for more future episodes of Success Is Podcast. If you have any suggestions, please comment below. Look forward to seeing you next time.